is Dr. Isela Garcia here, and I am going to share some layout designs or kind of think through the process. We did this a little bit during our designing the early childhood environment session, and I just am going to draw some stuff out here on the whiteboard. Now, I do want to say that nothing is ever to scale, and sometimes it's a good idea until you go into the classroom and you start moving furniture around. I am going to make some assumptions here about having some furniture, and this is one of the things that I think is super significant to remember, is that if you don't have furniture, it's hard to do a layout and design that has learning areas. I've had teachers make a request to meet with me virtually and talk through their classroom design, but they don't have any furniture. So it's really hard to do that. So I would say either, find out what your district can offer. Some districts have a warehouse, have a storage unit. Sometimes you can put emails out to teachers and ask if they have any excess furniture that they're wanting to get rid of. Sometimes it's usually at the end of the school year, you'll find some retired teachers or teachers that are retiring and they're ready to get rid of some stuff. So if you want to meet with me, kind of keep that in the back of your mind. You have enough furniture where we can kind of do some playing with. Okay, so I'm going to go through and just draw. Now again, this is just quick sketches. All right, so you remember when you go into a classroom, you're going to look at your corners. So where are your corners, okay? Corners should be for your sociodramatic play area or your library area if you're preschool, your literacy area, book publishing and literacy area can kind of move. It can actually be more than just a corner. It should be bigger than just sort of a library space. In kinder, first and second, and I would say even third, I love to see, I actually went into a fifth grade classroom recently, and there was a nook, a little reading nook. I love to see little reading nooks, and had a little couch in there, and it had all these books, sort of looked like a little library. Really, that's what we want for kiddos. We want them to have a space where but they have to be able to use the space. That's the other thing too. You don't want to set this stuff up if they can't ever use it. Like, why would we do that? Like, to me, that makes no sense. So if you're going to set up your environment, it has to be utilized and accessible to children. I feel like we're kind of being a little cruel when we set up this like beautiful, enticing space to read, and then they don't ever get to use it, or they get to use it once a week. Like, that should be accessible to them. All right, so corners, okay? So think about your corners. And then, of course, there are things that kind of, you have to have your projector and your smart board on this wall. And so I did it, the last time I did it on the far left, I believe. And so let's just pretend here it's on this side. Okay, so I'm gonna draw, oops, let me get my pencil here. I'm gonna draw here, this is gonna be my dry erase board. All right, so why can't you see that? Let's see. I'm looking at it right here. Let's get view options. Okay, there we go. All right. So then we're going to call that our dry erase area. Now what happens, or our smartboard area, sorry. And so what happens here is we're probably more than likely going to put your rug. Okay, so here's our rug. Okay. Now, unlike Procreate, it doesn't make it a perfect rectangle. So here's our rug. And let's just say then we are off the rug, okay? We have a little space just to the, on this side of the rug. And then we have a space on the other side. Now I'm going to, in that little corner, I'm going to, my little picture here. Let me erase that on my board. I'm going to just kind of create a teacher workstation right here. Okay, so there's just a teacher workstation there. And so that means, and I know some of you really want to hold on to your desks and your entire space where you have all your materials. I kind of think of this classroom as being an our space, and so I try to minimize that as much as I possibly can, because I want to utilize sort of every part of this classroom for the use, for children's use. Okay, so then what I'm going to do, let's say we have a sink and built-ins back here. Okay, so we're going to have a sink and some built-ins. And then let's just say here is, some classrooms have bathrooms, some do not. Okay, so let's just say that's a bathroom space right there, or this is into the bathroom. Okay, and then let's call this a door right here. That's the exit. Okay, all right. So these are sort of our, and then let's just, this classroom doesn't have any built-in cabinets, okay? I know there are some, I was just meeting with a couple teachers, they don't have any built-ins at all, which could be a good thing and then could be a bad thing. You know, there are lots of ways to look at it. All right, so what I wanna do, remember, I want, if you have a sink, not all classrooms do. So if you have a sink, you want to utilize it as best you can. So what I try to do, and let's just say I have, a lot of classrooms have rectangle tables. So I'm going to incorporate both, okay? So I'm going to put an art table here. And I'm going to put enough, because it's a larger one, for 6 kids. Okay. Now remember, whenever you set up your areas for children to actually use, your chairs are what's going to determine the number of children that can be there. So if you have an activity going where you want to limit the number of children, you want to pull your chairs away. So you want to put there 4 chairs for 4 children. And then if you want, like, let's say a meal time, or when you are working on something specifically, you can add all 6 chairs, okay? So teach children that. That way they can self-monitor and they know 4 chairs equals 4 kids for activities that you have going on. All right, so over here then we have, and what this is sort of creates an interesting experience, because right here, on this side here has taken our entire corner, right, our entire wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make, let's see here, I am going to make this space right here our block area. Okay, and I said sociodramatic play areas. Actually, let me erase that. Now your block area can be in the corner. It's totally okay to do that. I'm trying to think, because this is very limiting in terms of corners, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller. Oops. Right in here. Again, that whole to scale thing is really hard when you're doing something like this. And so then I'm going to make this into my sociodramatic play area. So I'm going to add a shelf right here, okay? Now this shelf is going to be specifically for your accessories. In your sociodramatic play area, you want to have the furniture for dramatic play, and then you want to have the shelf, you should have at least 1 shelf for any kind of accessories, extended types of materials, other themes. So if you have like cash register, if you have stuff for a medical kit, veterinarian kit, you want to have that, a shelf for that. It's also a place to store your babies. You remember, you don't want babies in a cradle. And the reason is because then they have to dump them out in order to use them. All right, so then we're going to put our dramatic play furniture. Now, remember the rules around tippy-toppy. If it's tippy-toppy and it will fall, and if it's a heavy piece of furniture, you want to make sure that it is anchored to the wall and up against the wall. Okay, so you have to be able to kind of identify what may or may not be safe for children and make sure you set up your room accordingly. Now, the furniture that we have in our little pretend drawing is not tippy-toppy, it's pretty sturdy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my furniture, okay, and I'm gonna kitty this so that there's an entry there, okay? And then I might have, actually, you know what I'm gonna do instead? I'm gonna take this out, and then I'm going to add sort of a couch or a little sitting space here. And then I'm gonna leave this open. I'm gonna make this a little bit, try to make it as straight as I can, or maybe not. And then I'm gonna put, so this is a couch, and then I'm gonna put sort of a little rug right there. And then I'm gonna put a little table right here, okay? And then the little table will have either 2 or 4 little seats. And then, okay, so that's one way to do it. Okay, so I'm just gonna show you one way because I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna take this out. Okay. And I'm gonna take this out too. Okay. And so if one of the things that we can easily do here too is you can draw it in your furniture. Okay, so I'm gonna put some furniture here, and then I'm gonna put my table here, and then I'm going to make another room. Okay, now this shelf is going to face this way for blocks, and I'm gonna put a couch here. Okay, put a little rug. And then maybe if you even have a little table with a little lamp or something on it, okay? So then they can move between these 2 rooms. This is where you might also have maybe a baby cradle right in here, okay? So this would be a couch, a rug. So this might be your sink. So I'll put a sink. If you have stove, refrigerator, and then on this shelf here, you would have your materials or your space for clothing. On this back wall, you could also have a rack that you have hanging right there for clothing, for stuff like that. Remember not to have drawers because, now you can have drawers. I'm not opposed to drawers, but you gotta make sure you keep up with the cleanliness and the organization of the drawers because they become catch-alls. Another thing you can do here, maybe right in here. Let's try right in here. You could put a shower rod right here, okay? So like a shower rod, and or even one of those, I forget what they're called, one of those spring rods. And you can put it between a piece of furniture and your wall. If you can get it tight enough, that means that the furniture really needs to be sort of pushed up against it. You can hang clothing there. Okay, and you want to make sure, always make sure that you have clothing for both genders. Okay, stereotypical clothing for both genders, because and that you shouldn't add limitations to that. It's not only girls wear this and only boys wear this. It's for everyone to use. Okay, so this is our entire sociodramatic play area. So we have a kitchen. I'm looking at my drawing, it's horrible. But at least you kind of know what it is, right? And so we have our sort of kitchen area, and we have our little second room. If you have the space, make a second room, okay? Now we are then going to create this space here to be blocks, okay? Now, here's the thing. I think you need at least 2 to 3 shelves for blocks, depending on the number of blocks you have and the materials that you have to support block play. I think that your space should be a good sized space, okay? That means that you need to have enough space for children to be able to build extensively. And so this could go a couple different ways. Let's say, I'm just gonna say, do the first layout. If you have shelves, okay? So here are the block shelves, and I'm gonna have them facing inward like this, okay? And I don't know if this is actually a big enough space. Usually we also have a rug that defines the space. You don't need to. The other thing too that a lot of programs do, is they add a table that's been dropped all the way down to the floor, so, or a platform, like a wooden platform to build from. That adds a whole other dimension in block play. So if you have the ability to do that, where you can get a table pulled all or pushed all the way down, or a foundational platform, do that. Put it in that in the block area. I'll tell you, it changes the experience completely. So if you have enough blocks or ample blocks in your classroom, you may need 2 shelves. Now they need to be set up in silhouette with silhouettes, and they need to be well organized. Please don't put your blocks inside a bin and that rolls around, or just throw them on the shelf. They need to be put back appropriately. It's all math. So if you look at it as you're building foundations in math, sometimes we have a higher tolerance for really supporting that whole process of cleanup and grouping things, putting things away, that sort of thing. Okay? All right, so there's our block space. And again, I'm not really sure that this is a big enough space, but you know, we're just going to leave it as is. So I'm just going to write blocks right in here. Okay. Now we have over here where the art is. So let me put art. Okay, visual arts. Now, what we'd like to do is create an art publishing area combined. And the reason, now we don't always have to do this, but it's a nice thing to do. It's a nice thing to do because there's so many opportunities where the art materials can be utilized for our bookmaking, our illustrations, reflecting upon stories, writing stories, to give children art materials to be truly creative, sparks that imagination with them that actually really encourages and excites some children around reading and writing. Because they lean into the art. It's just like STEAM, you know, when it leans into the art experience for children who wouldn't otherwise be interested in that kind of experience around STEM types of experiences. The art is what triggers the excitement for them, and then helps them. It's sort of as an invitation that's non-threatening for children to move into STEM types of activities. Okay, so just something to think about. And I'm going to do 2 different ideas here. Okay, so the first, I'm just going to create, actually, let me see how I'm going to do this here. I'm trying to think how I want to do this, because I can do one of 2 things. All right, so let me put math and science. There are lots of different ways. I'm trying to decide which way to go first. Okay, so let's do this. Let's create this space here. Oh, let me erase that here. I'm going to add 2 rounds. Okay, so I'm going to add, now not everybody has round tables. I'm going to add 2 rounds here. And what I'm going to do here is these rounds, so these fit 4 kids. Okay. These rounds are for our dramatic play, or not dramatic play, our publishing and literacy area. So then what I'm going to do, and this is going to look a little weird, I'm going to add some shelving here. Okay. And I'm going to add a shelf right here. Okay. And this little space right in the center, actually, let me see. If I had the shelving, I would add another one right here. Okay, there's that to scale thing, right? Big shelves, small shelves, that kind of thing. And so what I'm doing is I'm creating, let me see, let me make this one a little bit longer. Okay. No, I'm going to erase that. Let's say I did it this way, and this sometimes makes people nervous when you do stuff that's sort of kitty corner, and I actually like that a lot. So I'm going to add some shelving that is faced this way for the art, so that remember, your shelves have to be connected to a table or a space where they can use materials. Far too often teachers don't do that. It's like we have a shelf over here and we have a table over here. Oh, the kids know what to do. You make your life harder that way. You also don't teach children sort of those foundational experiences where no assumptions are made. So let me back up and explain that a little bit, because that was crazy how I just did that. We make assumptions that kids know what to do, and then we spend a lot of I would say wasted energy in trying to teach them where and what and how. If we just have the shelves grounded in an area, then children they learn how to that this shelf, the materials go here. And then that's not to say that we don't allow for materials to move through the room, because I do allow for that. As long as it's being used in a way that is constructive and not destructive, then it's absolutely fine. But we want to make sure that we make no assumptions that kids are just going to know. Now, I will say into, second and third grade, it becomes much easier for children to make those types of abstract connections and be able to make those types of decisions. But when they're younger, we have to make it where it makes sense. It has to make sense. Okay, so in our publishing and writing area, our publishing and literacy area, however you want to call it, this would be sort of that space. And so if you can see, and let me change my color here. Oops, there we go. So what I've done here is that children can work in this space right in here, and then they can also work in this space, and that the tools can be interchangeable between the entire area. Now, if you have, I'm gonna kind of mark this up over here, if you have shelving, or I'm sorry, those cabinets, and you don't have a whole lot of shelving, you can pull some of those cabinet doors off. I mentioned that in the session. You can pull them off, make sure that you store them in a place where you will not lose them, and that the next teacher coming in will be able to easily find them if you forget to put them back on. So make sure you tape all of the hardware together and either put it behind a shelf or up against a wall where it's sort of tucked away, maybe even behind your teacher desk area, okay? But that makes for an easy way to have shelving in your classroom. Okay, so I'm going to write here, let me get so we have our literacy and publishing area. Okay, and again, in with art is a great thing to have. Now, what do we still need? Now, if you subscribe to having a safe place in your classroom, I want you to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Where would be a safe place for kids? I am also a fan of having a nook. Remember I shared that, a nook around library. And then we need for sure science and math. Now, if you have the opportunity to, or the space or the materials to include a deconstruct area, that would be awesome. But if you don't, you can also use a bus bin, one of those bins, and just bring it out and then put it away. So it doesn't have to be an area of its own. So just as long as you have the materials accessible to children and that, you have a space that you can utilize, okay? All right, so let's put our math and science, and I think I did this I like to do this where I separate out, and maybe I need to move it a little bit closer to the rug. I like to add division, and I know this makes people crazy because they feel claustrophobic, they feel like the room is too tight. The problem is, and that's often an adult perspective, when we have, and I'll show you another example in a little bit, but when you have too much open space, it creates a runway for children. It also creates, for children who have ADHD, it's what I call the boing boing effect. They boing here, they boing there, they boing there, and they don't, it's like when we define the spaces for them, they go deeper into the experience. We know this over and over and over again. All of the observational research that has been done in early childhood classrooms, it indicates that when the spaces are are well designed, and I don't like to use the word confined, but really well designed, what happens is they are able to focus better and longer, which is very different than when we have them all the playthings along the edge of the classroom. Children tend to not go deep in their experiences, and that's what we want. We want depth. We want children to have that high level, sophisticated type of play, not a run around free for all. Okay. All right. So we're going to put a shelf, and I'm going to make this shelf go this way. Now, once I'm done with this one, well, I don't know if I will, but I'm going to just tell you that if you don't have the space for blocks, like a separate space for blocks, it is okay for you to use your rug space, your circle time area, for your blocks. There are teachers who just lack of space who will do that and have done that really well. My colleague Debbie doesn't like to see that. I'm not as bothered by that at all. I've done it as a classroom teacher, and it worked out fine for me. So then I would add a table here. So let's just say this is math. Okay. And this is where people start to get a little freaky with me. That sounded funny. Because sometimes we want to keep, okay, so this is a table. So let me just, I was like, that looks like a shelf. Okay. Oh. Actually, let me go through and erase those, make them round so we know those are chairs. Makes it easier. Okay. And now I'm going to add another shelf here. Oh my goodness. There it goes. I deleted it and I got freaked out there for a minute. Okay, so then I'm going to add a shelf. Now, depending on what you have in terms of shelving, okay, so let's just say you are limited in shelves. So we're going to then add this shelf to face this way, okay? And then maybe I have a round table that I can add here, okay? And so then maybe here is my science. Okay, a lot of teachers lack science tools and materials. A lot of teachers. So you need open-ended tools. You need stuff like magnifying glasses, the loops that you can use that are used for jewelry. Those are awesome to have. Hand lenses, the really smaller ones, plastic, easy to come by. Even little science journals. You want, I mean, you need magnet wands, color wands. I mean, you need open-ended types of science experiences. I know a lot of people go out and buy those kits. The kits are very limiting. Not that the kits aren't a good activity to do, but you need just a lot of open-ended science tools. So let's just say that I have like a little TV stand, you know, those TV, just normal TV with just open shelving, and then it's lower to the ground. So let's say I just butt up that up against here. Okay, I don't know how to indicate that it's a TV stand, but that it's lower. Okay, so that will totally work right here. And so then maybe, or like I had a planter that stood, that had little bins, you can put that there up against there. Then let's say it's not very sturdy, so then I can anchor it to this shelf right here. Okay, remember, we don't like to buddy shelves up together because if you are limited in shelving and you push them together, it takes away from that being an essential barrier to your learning areas. So don't butt them up against one another unless, of course, you have excess shelves, then it's not as big of an issue, okay? So I'm going to make, now that we have, oh, let me write science, okay? So we've got our math, our science, our art, and let me see if I do this here. So we've got art, we have science, we have math, literacy and publishing, we have blocks, and then I didn't write soc or sociodramatic. Whoops. All right. Okay, so we have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 areas. Now, I am going to add a little library space because I think that I personally just think that's an important thing to have. Now, is it absolutely necessary? Not if you have books throughout your classroom, especially if you have a well-stocked literacy and publishing area. But we have this extra little space where the teachers, and I'll write the teacher, okay, the teacher's little stand is. So I'm going to make this a little library. So I might have some bean bags. I might put a little rug right there. And then maybe, let me do this. Let me erase that first. I'm going to do the shelf. So I'm going to put a little shelf right there. A standing bookshelf is my preferred bookshelf for the library area, particularly in our preschool, kinder, and 1 classrooms. And the reason is because out of sight, out of mind, children will sometimes not dig for books unless they know their favorite book is in there. And so I want children to really have the books open and facing them. So this would be my little library nook. Okay, and then like I did with all the others, okay. And then what I would do is in this little space, and I'm gonna make this yellow here. In this little space right in here, I would make my safe place, okay? So my safe place, because it's a nice little sort of, and I would add things to sort of close it off a little bit. Some people have those wooden square cubes you can use. Other ones have a papazon, even if you put a little rug there, you can add some pillows and a basket with some things to help children sort of calm and soothe. So that might be books and stuffed animals and squeezy balls or those squishy balls, even a puzzle or 2 of emotions. Sometimes, not sometimes, Lakeshore has these emotion puzzles. I actually like to make my own puzzles and put them there of the actual children. So something to just kind of think about. Now we still have this big space over here. Now the likelihood, right, in a classroom is probably pretty low that you would have this space, or pretty slim. But let's say that it is an open space that we can use. So this is where I would add my deconstruct. Now let's say I have a tool bench, so I might put it up against the wall. Okay, and this I would frame out, and I would actually use masking tape to frame that. So I'm going to indicate that. I'm going to use blue. So I'm going to put masking tape right there. And for my deconstruct space, and some classrooms have these shelves that go, they're like they're like shelves that go across, they're low. I let you know, if you have that, it's a perfect place to put your deconstruct, your maker space, tinkering area. But here's what I would do. I did this every time. Oops. I limited it to 2 children. So only 2 kids can be in that space. And I use the masking tape to sort of create that barrier where children will know that this is a space that when you go into this space, this is the 2 kids. So you can't step in unless it's your turn. That just kind of promotes that expectation of safety and following the rules in that space. So this is what a classroom might look like. We have, and let me write deconstruct here. And this is called a lot of things. All right, so let's go through this. We have our art, our deconstruct, science, literacy, blocks, sociodramatic play, library, okay, math. I don't know if I said that already. Now, most schools, and everyone has a different fire marshal, most schools require a 6 feet. Whoops. 6 feet from the door. Let's make that yellow. So 6 feet from the door for fire regulation, and sometimes it's true of the bathroom as well. Now, I will say that if you have space where the door is, this is where I would put the cubbies, right there. And if you have space on this side, I would put cubbies on this side too. It still allows for the 6 feet that go from here to here. And yeah, so these would be, let me write that, cubbies. Kids should have a space that is their own, where they can store their clothes, their whatever, okay? All right, so that's kind of a classroom layout and design. I think I will, maybe I'll do another one that kind of looks a little bit different than this one, kind of give a different idea, but I'm hoping that you will find this helpful as you are designing your classroom. And remember, you can always reach out to me, okay? Thank you.